Welcome to Wagon Train Wednesdays, presented by the Archway.
For hundreds of years before the Oregon Trail era, the Pawnee people lived in villages of earth lodges near the Loup, Republican, and South Platte rivers in the region that is now Nebraska. They grew corn, squash, and beans and went on seasonal buffalo hunts. As the United States began to expand in the 1700s, several new groups of Native Americans traveled to the Great Plains and began to move into traditional Pawnee territory. As a result, frequent and violent conflicts arose with the more nomadic Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people who were new to the area. The Pawnee people came to consider these newcomers as troublesome enemies. Since the time when Spanish explorers began the conquest of Mexico, many native warriors chose to join European forces in battles against their traditional native enemies. The Pawnee people were known for their peaceful relations with American immigrants and for their hostility towards the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people. So it wasn't surprising that when the U.S. Army sought to recruit Pawnee men to fight against those natives who were hostile to American expansion, many of the Pawnee people joined a branch of the U.S. military called the Pawnee Scouts. The original company of 70 Pawnee Scouts were posted at Fort Kearny under the command of General Samuel Ryan Curtis in 1865. Later that year, First Lieutenant Frank North, who had experience working as a clerk and interpreter at the Pawnee Agency Trading Post in Genoa, Nebraska, recruited an additional 100 Pawnee Scouts and took command of the group. The group fought successful battles against the Cheyenne and Arapaho in 1865 and was temporarily disbanded in 1866. In March of 1867, North, who was now a major, was authorized to reactivate the group and recruited 4 50-man companies of Scouts. Known as the Pawnee Battalion, the Scouts helped to protect the Union Pacific workers who were building the Transcontinental Railroad. The Lakota and Cheyenne people, whose culture and survival depended on buffalo hunts, could see that construction of the railroad was accelerating the destruction of the great buffalo herds. On August 6, 1867, Ogallala Lakota and Cheyenne warriors led by Cheyenne Chief Turkey Leg cut a telegraph line, derailed and destroyed a train, and killed several Union Pacific workers. On August 22nd, at Plum Creek Station, Nebraska, Major North and 42 Pawnee Scouts engaged 150 Lakota and Cheyenne warriors who were involved in the attack. Many of the Lakota and Cheyenne warriors were killed, and the Pawnee Scouts captured Chief Turkey Leg's wife and child. The chief's family was later exchanged for prisoners that were held by the Cheyenne. The Pawnee Scouts were disbanded and reorganized several times over the next several years. In 1875, because of ongoing hostilities with the Lakota people and the ever-increasing flood of immigrants from the east, the Pawnee people agreed to be relocated to Indian Territory in Oklahoma. But the journey to their new home was long and difficult. They encountered new diseases for which they had no immunity, and the land they were given was unsuitable for growing their traditional crops. When Major North traveled to Indian Territory in 1876 to recruit Pawnee men to fight in the conflict that became known as the Great Sioux War, the Pawnee people were living in poverty, and the men were willing to enlist for pay. 100 Pawnee men joined North and traveled back to Fort Robinson in Nebraska, where the Sioux chiefs Sitting Bull and Red Cloud were actively fighting the U.S. Army. On October 23rd, North's Pawnee Scouts and a regiment of cavalry advanced on Red Cloud's camp and captured him. The chief and his band were held at Fort Robinson until the end of the war. In November, the Pawnee Scouts and 800 cavalrymen attacked a Cheyenne camp in the Bighorn Mountains. The brutal battle left the Cheyenne destitute. With nowhere else to go, many of them walked to Fort Robinson to surrender. The war was over. Major North retired from the military, and the Pawnee Scouts were disbanded for the final time on May 1, 1877. Learn more about Major Frank North and the Pawnee Scouts. Find these books at your local library or online. War Party in Blue, Pawnee Scouts in the U.S. Army by Mark Vandelot and Walter R. Echohawk, and Two Scouts and Their Pawnee Battalion, The Experiences of Frank J. North and Luther H. North by George Bird Grinnell. Find more videos in the Wagon Train Wednesday series on the Kearny Archway YouTube channel. Be sure to follow the Archway on Facebook to see future Wagon Train Wednesday videos.